Hi, boys and girls. I'm going to start a new chapter book, and it is called Miss Piggle. So I'm going to read the first page. I want you to get out your drawing paper, and I want you to draw a picture of what's in your head when I'm reading. What do you see? Mrs. Piggle herself. I expect I might as well begin by telling you all about Mrs. Piggle. So that whenever I mention her name, which I do very often in this book, you will not interrupt and ask, who is Miss Piggle? What does she look like? How big is she? How old is she? What color is her hair? Is her hair long? Does she wear high heels? Does she have any children? Is there a Mr. Piggle? Mrs. Piggle lives here in our town. She is very small and has a hump on her back. When children ask her about the hump, she says, "Oh, that's a big lump of magic. Sometimes it turns me into a witch, other times into a dwarf or a fairy, and on special occasions it makes me into a queen." The children are all very envious of the hump because besides being magic, it is such a convenient, fascinating place for wings. Mrs. Piggle has brown, sparkly eyes and brown hair which she keeps very long, almost to her knees, so the children can comb it. She usually wears it on top of her head in a knot, unless someone has been combing it, and then she has braids or long wet curls or long hair just hanging, and with a jeweled crown on top and a flower on top. One day I saw her digging in her garden, wearing the jeweled crown, and with her hair billowing down her back, she waved gaily and said, "I promised Betsy," Betsy is one of her children's friends, "that I would not touch this hair until she came home from school." And she went on her digging. Mrs. Piggle's skin is a goldy brown, and she has a warm, spicy sugar cookie smell that is very comforting to children who are sad about something. Her clothes are all brown and never look crisp and pressed because they're all used for dress-up. She wears felt hats which the children poke and twist into witches' and pirates' hats, and she does not mind at all. Sunday mornings she takes one of the hats off the closet shelf and gives it a few thumps, pulls it firmly down fore and aft, and wears it to church. She wears very high heels all the time, and it's glad to let the little girls borrow her shoes. Mrs. Piggle has no family at all. She says that her husband, Mr. Piggle, was a pirate, and after he buried all of his treasure in the backyard, he died. She just herself and Wag, her dog, and Lightfoot, her cat. The most remarkable thing about Mrs. Piggle is her house, which is upside down. It is a little brown house sitting there in its tangly garden, and it looks like a small brown puppy lying on its back with its feet in the air. Mrs. Piggle says that when she was a little girl, she used to lie in bed and gaze up at the ceiling and wonder what it would be like if the house was upside down. And so when she grew up and built her own house, she had it built upside down just to see. The bathroom, the kitchen, and the staircase are right side up. They are more convenient that way. You can easily see that you do not cook on an upside down stove or wash dishes in an upside down sink or walk upside down stairs. In the living room of her house is a large chandelier, and instead of being on the ceiling, it is on the floor. Of course, it is really on the ceiling, but the ceiling is the floor, and so it is on the floor. And the children turn on the lights and then squat around it, pretending it's a campfire. Mrs. Piggle says that her chandelier is the only one in town which is really put to any real use. Her bedrooms all have slidey boards in them because if you look up at your attic ceiling, you will see that a slanty ceiling, when turned upside down, makes a very fine slidey board. Also, all the wall lights are very close to the floor and handy for the small children. For the first 5 or 10 years after the house was built, Mrs. Piggle climbed in and out of her rooms over the high doorways, but now she has little steps where just the thing to practice jumping. She gives the children chalk so they can mark on the rug how far they can jump. Nobody knows how old Mrs. Piggle is. She says she doesn't even know herself. She says, "What difference does it make how old I am when I shall never grow any bigger?" Mrs. Piggle's dog Wag has puppies every once in a while, and so she keeps a long list of names of children who want them on her blackboard in her kitchen. For Lightfoot, the cat's kittens, she has a long waiting list on the blackboard in the dining room. Mrs. Pigglewiggle's backyard is full of big holes where small boys dig for Mr. Pigglewiggle's buried treasure. And her front yard is full of flowers which little girls pick, jam into vases, and place in her living room or carry to their teachers. Every child in town is a friend to Mrs. Pigglewiggle, but she knows very few of their parents. She says grown-ups make her nervous. For the first year after she built her house, Mrs. Pigglewiggle lived there all by herself, except for Wag and Lightfoot, and she was very lonely. Then one dark, rainy afternoon, when she was baking sugar cookies and thinking how much fun it would be if she knew someone besides Wag and Lightfoot to invite for tea, she happened to look out of her kitchen window, and there, coming up the street in the pouring rain, dragging a big suitcase and bawling, was a little girl. Mrs. Pigglewiggle wiped the flour off her hands and hurried right out into the rain and invited the little girl in for tea. The little girl's name was Mary Lou Robertson, and she was 8 years old, and she was running away from home. She told Mrs. Pigglewiggle all this after she drank 3 cups of cambric tea and ate 7 sugar cookies. She said, "I'm running away from home because I hate to wash dishes. All I do is wash dishes. I'm just a servant. Dishes, dishes, dishes. Wash, dry, put away. That's all I do. My mother doesn't love me at all. She isn't my real mother anyway. She probably got me out of an orphanage just to wash her dishes." Mary Lou began to cry again, so the 8th sugar cookie got quite soggy before she finished it. Mrs. Pigglewiggle said, "Isn't she your real mother?" Mary Lou said, "She says she is, but no real mother would make you wash dishes. Wash dishes, wash dishes." "Now that's a funny thing," said Mrs. Pigglewiggle. "I mean, you're hating to wash dishes so much because, you see, I like to wash dishes. In fact, I enjoy washing dishes so much that a cause of great sorrow to me is the fact that the only dishes I must wash are for Wag, Lightfoot, and me. 3 or 4 dishes a meal, that's all. When I wash dishes, Mary Lou, I pretend I'm a beautiful princess with long golden curly hair." Mary Lou's hair was jet black and braided into 2 stiff little pigtails, an apple blossom skin, and forget-me-not blue eyes. "I have been captured by a wicked witch, and my only chance to get free is to wash every single dish and have the whole kitchen sparkly clean before the clock strikes. For when the clock strikes, the witch will come down and inspect to see if there's a crumb anywhere. If there are pots and pans that have been put away wet, if the silverware has been thrown in the drawer, or if the sink has not been scrubbed out, the witch will have me in her power for another year." Mrs. Pigglewiggle looked at the clock and jumped up. "It is 10 minutes to 4, Princess, and we have so much to do. Hurry, hurry, hurry." Mary Lou also jumped up and began carrying the tea things to the sink, and Mrs. Pigglewiggle whisked them in and out of the dishwash. And Mary Lou dried them, and Mrs. Pigglewiggle hurried as fast as she could to put the cookie things away, and every once in a while she would say, "Hark, Princess, do you hear the thump of the witch's big gnarly cane?" Then Mary Lou, her braids bopping up and down with excitement, would say, "I hear it, Princess. It is coming closer and closer." Soon the kitchen sparkled. The dishes were washed and dried and put away, and every crumb had been swept off the floor. Mary Lou even curled Lightfoot's tail neatly around her legs and smoothed Wag's fur. Just before the clock struck, Mrs. Pigglewiggle said to Mary Lou, "Princess, I must leave you now. But show the witch your work, and oh, I hope you're going to be freed." Then she went upstairs, and pretty soon down the stairs came a terrible old witch with a long black dress and a tall black hat and a big gnarly black cane. Mary Lou was a little scared until she saw the sparkly eyes of Mrs. Pigglewiggle under that black hat. She showed the witch in the kitchen, and the witch took out the cookie pans and carried them over to the light to see if they were clean and dry. She got down on her knees, squeaking like a rusty gate, to see if Mary Lou had swept under the stove. She felt inside the teacups to see if there was sugar in the bottoms, and she put on her glasses to examine the sink. She could not find anything wrong, so she handed Mary Lou the key to the kitchen door and screeched out, "You are free, Princess. But I will get you again, never fear." The witch clumped back up the stairs, and in a few minutes, down came Mrs. Pigglewiggle. "Well," said Mrs. Pigglewiggle, "do you see why I like to wash dishes?" Mary Lou said, "Oh, Mrs. Piggle, that was the most fun I've ever had." Mrs. Piggle said, "Of course, you can have more fun than I can because you have more dishes to wash." "If only I had more dishes I could take longer, I would be princess with curly yellow long hair, apple blossom skin, blue eyes, and a beautiful voice, and I would sing sad songs over the dishpan. Also, if I had more dishes, I would have the witch ride through the night on a broomstick, and I would creep out on the back porch to see if she was coming. I could hear her land with a thump on the roof, and I would slip upstairs to see if she was going to slide down the chimney or thump down the stairs. Oh, there would be so many more exciting things to pretend if only I had more dishes to wash." After a while, it stopped raining and the sun came out, and Mary Lou took her suitcase and went home. That night, her mother, it really was her mother, of course, almost fainted when she came out to the kitchen exactly 27 minutes after dinner, and Mary Lou was sweeping the floor, and all the dishes were washed and dried and put away, and everything was immaculate. Mrs. Robinson rushed in and called Mary Lou's father and came out to the kitchen and pretended to fall on the floor with surprise. And then he said to Mary Lou's mother, "I like your new maid, madam. In fact, she is so much better than Tilly Slopwash, who used to be here, that I think we should invite her to the moving picture show some early evening." Then Mary Lou told them all about Mrs. Piggle, and Mary Lou's mother said, "Oh yes, I remember seeing that odd little house. She sounds like a charming friend, and if you are certain that she invited you, you may go over there after school tomorrow." The next day after school, Mary Lou went to see Mrs. Piggle. She took her best friend Kitty Wheeling with her, and Mrs. Piggle was very glad to see them. She showed them through her upside-down house and served tea and cookies. Kitty said when her mouth was full of cookies, "My worst trouble is bed making. I cannot get them smooth. I would much rather wash dishes like Mary Lou. But Mother won't let me change with my sister Sally, who washes the dishes, until I've learned to make beds." Mrs. Piggle poured herself another cup of tea, gave a saucer of cream to Lightfoot and cookies to Wag, and then said, "If you think you have a hard time making beds, Kitty, imagine how hard it is for me." So we're going to stop there, and for the next time, we're going to see what happens with Mary Lou's friend who doesn't like to make beds. Have a great time. I can't wait to see your pictures. Love you.